America, my name is Osei-Frimpong and come to you every week live. And today we're going to talk about local politics and racial justice. A lot of people get this confused because they think it's about lowering prices and barriers to entry in terms of the price point and not building assets. If you're serious about racial justice, it's going to be about building assets in black families in the United States. And that asset grab is going to have to change the metabolism of how, both economic and political action work in the United States. And at the local level, they say like, oh, politics is local and you should begin local. Actually, local politics is really tricky because it's often feckless because a lot of the municipalities are just charters from the state, so they don't really have that much power. But what they can do, you need to look in and see what you can affect. And what you can't affect is contracting. So it's going to be part one of a three-part project where one, I'm going to talk about contracting. Second, I'm going to talk about jobs. Next, I'm going to talk about hiring managers. But the contracting is the biggest one. So the biggest thing you could do for local politics isn't necessarily, if you're serious about racial justice, isn't necessarily build affordable housing or concern yourself with density, because poor people are still poor. You have to focus on building assets. So what can you do as both an advocate for local political campaigns concerning racial justice and maybe a local political official concerning racial justice? You think about all of your contracts for major buildings in that municipality. Every mid-sized city, you're gonna be remodeling a school, putting up a library or a jail, or just doing some huge capital project, which is like $20 million. Now you move that $20 million into black hands, you've done more than just rename a street or paint or take down a statue. We got to figure out a way to get those $30, $40, $50 million projects into black contractors who are functionally locked out, because the people who do remodel that school or build that library, it's been the same four families in your local town for the last 60 years, and they sewed up that contract through handshake deals at the last Klan meeting in the 60s, right? So, or the Kiwanis Club or something. You have to understand, occupational segregation has been with us for longer than we think, and black people have just been locked out of so many of this, especially the lucrative building trades. So how do you diversify? First of all, if you're a white suburb, I'd say you're a white suburb and you want to do white. You want to do well. You think, well, maybe we just lower prices and we build more affordable housing, and that way black people come. But the thing is, black people don't want to move and be ruled over by you, and they shouldn't have to move and be ruled over by you. That doesn't look like racial justice. If you're a small and mid-sized town and you care about racial justice, don't just make it so that black people can come and be ruled by you. Make sure that your out-of-town contracts go to black people who live in their own neighborhoods, and so they can afford the amenities that you kind of take for granted. Right? So the goal isn't to get black people to move into white neighborhoods. The goal is to move white money into, and that's American money in the United States, into black neighborhoods. And that happens, and if you're a small white town, like, you don't need to get more black. You need to figure out a way that your out-of-town contracts for building your school, building that library, building that jail, go to, instead of the white company in another white suburb, it goes to a black community. So you need some sort of reciprocity agreement with the company that usually does your contract. For example, in Athens, it would be Carroll Daniel, some construction company based in Gainesville. Sewed up the contract back in the 50s when black people were literally being ran down by the Klan. And it's been having that contract ever since. And, in Athens, we do a huge school renovation every year, and the same company gets it. But now they have a structural monopoly insofar as they're the only folks, not the only folks, but there aren't a sufficient number, a critical mass of black people who have both the capital outlays for the licensing and bonding, but also access to the heavy equipment and architectural and engineering know-how. Right? So you have to build all that, and that's not going to happen in a year. So the Klan company, Carroll Daniel, will continue to get the contract for this year, and that's perfectly fine. But what you can do as a local entity is condition that contract on a 20-year plan that Carol Daniel participates in a program. Now, in Athens, we have enough black people, so there can be an in-house program to transition that contract to black Athenians, right? And it's going to take 20 years, right? Because it's going to be a program that builds in whatever technical or community college is in the area, and also putting together internships concerning project management internships concerning project management. Because even putting down the RFP for a $50 million program, that's a skill. That's a skill that's been accumulated by Carol Daniel for generations since, the Klan, right? So we need a 20-year plan so that in 20 years, that contract doesn't go to some other out-of-town white company. It goes to an in-town black company. And if you're a white town and you want to do this, let's say you're a suburb of Richmond, right? You're a white suburb of Richmond, and you want to do something about racial justice. It's tempting to say, maybe if we just lower prices, people will come to our white suburb. But maybe black people of Richmond shouldn't have to go to your white suburb and be ruled by you. It's kind of stressful to be around you. What you can do is make sure instead of your contract going to a company based in another white suburb of Richmond, you build a relationship with black community groups and city leadership in Richmond to build a program, and it could even be a consortium of white suburbs who want to do better by employing black people in Richmond. That in 20 years, black people can compete and undermine that structural monopoly in terms of licensing, bonding, access to heavy equipment, know-how, and actually make it the case that for your white suburb, that $30 million school project goes to a black company that's based in a black neighborhood in Richmond, so that what happens is that those people actually, get money, as opposed to the white company that's been doing it for the last 20 years. It goes to their wastrel niece's wedding or their nephew's vacation house, right? We could actually build black communities in Richmond by making sure Virginia, by making sure the suburb of Richmond uses black labor in Richmond for these huge construction contracts. But you have to actually have the will to have some hard conversation with the same family that's been doing these $30 and $40 million contracts for the last 60 years, right? So the idea is that we want to change the metabolism of major contracts. And changing that metabolism is a surgical process, but it concerns building partnerships and programs to detangle the cozy relationship of the Klan company with your local governance, right? And you could say if you have, let's say you have a large black population in town, you can just say it's a matter of public safety, because for the good of the nation, for the good of the city, it'll be more safe if the black people in it have good jobs and have access to the contract. So you can say, you could use the public city exemption. Say no, this isn't race-based. This is just based on public safety concerns. It would be safer if we have a local company do this as opposed to a Klan company that's based outside of this. Now, if you're a white city without a black population, but you still want to do racial justice, you can just say you want more competition. And you want to build competition to create the better value for the city overall. And to build competition means not going with the same Klan company you've gone with for the last 30 years. It's actually building a black company in a neighboring city, in the neighboring urban area. Right. So you get to keep your white city, but the people doing your construction, they weren't going to be from that city anyway. The company wasn't going to be from that city anyway. Instead, it's going to be, instead of the white other city, it's going to be a black other city that's going to come in and do the construction for your library or the big renovation for your school. And that's a way you can do racial justice that actually empowers black people. But you need to build the program with a 20-year plan. Now, any local government worth its salt has some sort of 25-year comprehensive plan, 25-year comprehensive plan. It's built by the worst people. Heck, some of them have 100-year comprehensive plans. It's built by the worst people. So you have to invade that. You have, like, some of the better people need to have 20 and 25-year comprehensive plans to diversify the contracts. Because if you don't do this, the contract for the rebuilding and remodeling of that school in 2045 is going to go to that same family that had the contract in 2010 and has it in 2025. And that family is not going to be black. And that's going to be a problem. Right? The 2045 is going to come. It's going to come. So plan for it, and plan for it to look different in terms of the distribution of assets and wealth than 2024. Okay, and that happens through a comprehensive plan to diversify contracts that will build a quality of black companies that will be able to participate and compete in these major 30 and 40 and $50 million development projects. Right. But that's going to take partnerships and intentional building and capacity building, but also partnerships like trusts to get away to start with seeding capital requirements so that the black companies can even compete in terms of bonding and licensing for these major contracts. So it's going to be, you look for a 20-year process. It's a 20-year process, but the 20 years is going to pass anyway. So you want to do it in a way that actually legitimizes the asset outlays and allocations, as a matter of racial justice, and not just reproduces the same metabolism of the same 4 white construction families who are still yet out of that town, like doing your $30 and $40 million projects for school renovations and stuff. So these are the conversations you need to have. You have a hard time. Problem is a lot. Okay, this is. First of all, if you appreciate what I'm saying, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, $50 a month, and I'll keep doing it. Remember, this is going to be a 3-part series. Next time, I'm going to talk about what local governments can do for jobs in terms of racial justice. Because in some ways they're hamstrings, in some ways they have actually some sort of clout and organizational power to provide an infrastructure for workers. But the most important thing is these contracts, because if you don't get the contracting right, you're missing the biggest pot of money. You'll be fighting over names and fighting over, little things, as opposed to the $50 million school renovation that needs to go to a black company, but can't, because we were locked out when those contracts were sewn up. So we need to build, like the local leadership needs to pressure the company that does get the contract in 2025 to participate in programs that will functionally work that company out of its job. And those are the kind of conversations we need to have. So it needs to be a reciprocal. So if you're a white town, instead of low income housing to move black people into your white town and be ruled by you, you should think in terms of what's it going to take for my white town to contract with black-owned companies that are based in black towns or towns with bigger black populations. And that will actually kind of insert real assets and real capital growth into those black communities so they can have the clean water that you have in your white town. Right? So that's the conversation we need to have. Not so much affordable housing as much as contracting. Because affordable housing is still let's bring these people over to our place. But contracting is let's build up, let's give them money and actually get them to work in their place, which is what we want. We want black communities to actually have money and have resources. And so, like I said, it's going to take 20 years in terms of not just technical know-how, but licensing experience and You want a critical mass. Now, Maynard Jackson put the screws to Atlanta to make sure this happened a lot in less than 20 years. And then I say this because of the 96 Olympics, when Jackson said, look, Atlanta wants the Olympics, but it's going to have to be, I want a third of black contractors. And that built a lot of contracting muscle in Atlanta. And depending on who you talk to, Marion Barry did a similar thing in Washington, D.C. I think when he first got elected, 3% of the contracts went to black companies. And this is why they elected him again after the crack, which he might have been set up. I still think that he might have been framed. I think it was at 47%. So this can be done. This can be done faster than 10 years, faster than 20 years, but you need to start the ball rolling if you're serious. You start the ball rolling if you're serious and about diversifying these contracts and changing the conversation to what is it going to take so that in 25 years, this school remodel, this $30 million school remodel, this $50 million school remodel is done by a black firm. That's a conversation you need to have. And if you're not willing to have that conversation, but you're willing to have like conversations about affordable housing, you just want to keep black people poor, which is not what I want to do here at the Funky Academic. So go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com. Be on the lookout for the part 2 of this, where I talk about jobs. And when I mention programs like this, there are going to be 2 types of people. They're going to be the people who just kind of scoff and say like it's not possible because they're scared and they never heard about anyone talk about it like this. And those are the worst kind of people because they're looking for reasons not to actually secure black people assets. They're looking for reasons. And a lot of these are going to be white women who are scared of talking about the building trades anyway, but they're looking for reasons why black people should not have control of their own assets, which is different than nonprofit or like affordable housing where you have to rent from some white landlord anyway. Like I want black people to control their own assets. And that means these big projects need to go to black companies and then black families who then spend it on the black things that they want to do. So be very wary. Watch this video with someone who's thinking about local leadership and look at the excuses that they're going to give about why this plan isn't viable. Because there is a 25-year plan and it does not include changing the metabolism of the city to ensure that black people get a fair share of contracts. And if it doesn't include that, then it's just a 25-year plan that reproduces racial injustice as opposed to a plan that reproduces racial justice. So go ahead and go over to funkyacademic.com, kick in if you appreciate what I'm doing. I'm uploading the podcasts in podcast form, and that will, find out my game a little bit. But the next live show will be on local politics and jobs and what local politics and local politicians can do to make sure that the black people working in that city work with good wages and a fair share of dignity. Thank you for your time, and I will talk to you the next time. Take care. Bye.